I'm Mark McGee with the Golden Gate chapter of the BMW Car Club. This is a series about using data and video at the track, but we're focused in particular on the Golden Gate chapter's track schools. We want to give you an idea of what a typical data review session looks like for people that sign up for the optional advanced data coaching. So over the 2 days of the track school, each driver will get 8 of these review sessions. This allows us to take an iterative approach. We're not going to try to solve everything at once. So when I reviewed this data, there were plenty of opportunities, and I narrowed it down to a smaller set. And if we have time at the end, I can talk a little bit about sort of the next set of priorities that I would go through. So the data set is from Laguna Seca. It's from 2017. It's one of the students driving a HPDE Ep7. We used an AIM Solo to collect the data. And we have some budget cameras, contour cameras, very similar to the GoPro that we use. In previous episodes, I've shown how you can integrate SmartyCam and video with data in Race Studio Analysis 3, which is a new product, or beta product, actually. Still, that software is still beta, but you don't have to have all the nice, tidy solution. You can still get a lot from data. And in fact, we're going to, from video, separate standalone video. And in fact, we're going to focus a lot on just the video side of things with this set of, with this review. So let me talk about the process a little bit. First thing, we want to identify opportunities and also things that the driver is doing well. I like to review the video from the track session on fast forward, so I can just kind of blow through that very quickly and get a sense for consistency and problem areas. And then we pull up the data from the track session and analyze. I typically pull up all of the laps, just, maybe not the in and out lap, just most of the laps, just to get a general view, but you can't really do anything with that other than just get a general impression. And I very quickly narrow it down to 1 lap, maybe 2, to review in detail. Also, very important is discussing the session with the driver. It's easy to jump to conclusions that may be incorrect if you haven't had a discussion with the driver as well. So the next step, there may be a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of issues that need to be addressed. We want to prioritize those, and I've kind of got a process laid out for those. And once we settle on what are the most important ones, I'll define goals. Now, sometimes, the students do an A, they should do B. Sometimes the goal is not go do B. Sometimes there may be an intermediate goal that helps the student eventually get to B. So that's an important part of the art of coaching someone, is giving them bite-sized pieces that make sense to them. Discussing the goals with the driver is really important. Basically, we're looking at the video clips and data and really trying to look at the issue from as many different perspectives as possible, so the student can really observe it. I always keep a pad next to me and a pen, and I'll sketch out things, and we'll look at the screens and so on. And what I like to do is get down to like a little 3x3 Post-it note. It's a really concise set of explanations of what the goals are, so they can take that with them. And a big part of it is I try to use prior successes. If you've done this thing well, I want you to work on this other thing. That can help the driver visualize the goals. Really being able to understand and visualize what the target is makes a big difference. So let's talk about finding things the driver does well. So this is not just to sort of compliment the driver and say, hey, you look marvelous. Some people talk about a compliment sandwich. You serve up a compliment, then you have some criticism, and then you wrap that up with another compliment. I think some people think it, like a teaspoon of sugar helps the medicine go down. I have a different motivation. It's not a bad thing to, help somebody, understand what they're doing well, but I have a different motivation. I want to provide positive reinforcement to help anchor those things the driver is doing well. They may or may not know they're doing something awesome. So you talk to them, and so that they'll keep doing that. Also, it's a useful anchor point for future goals. So I think in terms of a point of departure, you're doing this thing great. Now we're going to go on from there. One way to look at this is sort of stepping stones. Let's say that's my goal for now, and the driver's already here. So if I talk to the driver about where they are, that's important, so that they have a little bit less distance they need to travel, because they've already got some of what we need. If their starting point is a little earlier, we may end up defining intermediate goals along the way. And that's one of the things I mentioned earlier, that, they're at A, they need to go to B. Sometimes B is a little bit far. So we may break that down into to smaller pieces. The other thing is, this is a nice linear path. If you've ever crossed a wild stream on hopping from rock to rock, it's a little bit messy. You may sidestep, you may sort of go backwards a little bit, and eventually get your way across. And that's the way goals on track work. Sometimes it's not this straight linear set of goals. There may be a little bit of zigzagging on the way to the eventual goal. So here are some things that we're going to talk about with this data and video that we're looking at. First, there's consistency in car placement. Sometimes this is really good. So that's one of those things I'd like to anchor that and get the driver to really understand how they're doing that and what they're doing. But I need more consistency. There are places where the driver is not consistent, and we need to work on that. Also, I'd like to see the driver using the limits of the surface. There's a tendency, we talked about it in episode 6, drivers looking ahead and not using the full exit. Often drivers are, we want people looking ahead, but they're not completing what they're working on now by using the full surface of the track. So we want to talk about that. We'll go into turn 5 a little bit. Turn 5, the mid-corner speed is low, leaving too much on the table. We'll talk about the technique, not just, hey, go faster. We'll talk about the technique to get better. We'll be looking at the line, and we'll be talking about the topology of that corner. There's a lot going on in turn 5. Okay, so let's start with turn 11. This is my driver coming through turn 11. Lap 2, lap 3, very similar car placement. Lap 4, just right on the same spot. Lap 5, tiny bit of difference, but it's just a few differences. I would like to see the left side tires up there on the curbing, but they appear to be right there on the paint stripe at the bottom of the curbing, and the same place every time. So I want the driver to be able to use this skill in car placement in other parts of the track. And let's take a look at turn 7. Okay. This is, kind of what we were talking about before we started. If you look at turn 7, I would like to see the driver with left side tires on that curbing. Get comfortable. If the driver's uncomfortable with curbing, this is a great place to get comfortable with curbing. Just put your tires on that. Sometimes the surface allows you to actually get on that little strip of asphalt on the other side, but sometimes there are potholes. So the curbing is a nice, safe place to put the car. And what that does is, as you approach turn 8, and there's a brow there, being on the left helps you straighten up that entry and do a more effective job braking for the corner. So that's a pretty big difference, and we'd like to fix that. And that is a really easy place to fix it. There's not a whole lot going on. Just get the driver to focus on using that curb and putting the car within inches time after time. Here's turn 9. Again, difference is not as big, but it's, it's bigger than what we'd like to see. And the driver's not even getting to the paint at the bottom of the curbing. So we'd like to have the driver tighten that up. There are many other corners where there could be some work on consistency. These are a couple good corners to start with. Turn 7 should be easy. Turn 9, not so easy. It's blind. It's a challenge. So a couple things to think about. So anybody have any comments or questions about turn 7, turn 9, anything we've talked about so far?
I think turn 9 is complicated, as you said, because it's blind, but you also don't start on the outside edge of the track, so you don't really have as good a reference as you do in many other corners.
Yes. Yes. And so, in this case, the driver should be able to nail the turn 7 goal and may struggle a little bit with turn 9. But, it's a good measure, first session out, let's, with feedback, let's see how that goes. And maybe we refocus on something that's a little easier. Okay, so let's look at turn 5. Here, I'm going to go through frame by frame. So here we see where the nominal apex is. There's a cone there on the red curbing, and the driver is right there near the bottom of the blue and white curbing. And apex is right about there. You can see as we go down, the driver is using a little bit of curbing here, and apex is some distance after the red curbing. And even as we're getting near the end of the blue and white curbing, the driver's still on the left side near the end of that curbing. So a relatively late apex in that corner. And we emphasize, people hear over and over and over again, late apex. There's bumper stickers that say friends don't let friends early apex. We're always talking about late apexes. For drivers at this level, I want to really start challenging this conventional wisdom that, late apexes are always the best apexes. So I used this graphic previously. Let's look at this again. So here's my generic late apex line going through this corner. So my apex is after the geometric midpoint. And here's my exaggerated version of this where I kind of square it off a little bit. The point is you've got a lot of turning that happens before the apex, and after the apex, not so much turning. The radius is gigantic. I'm opening up the wheel. So what happens in a situation where I have high traction after the apex and low traction before the apex? Does this approach make sense? Maybe not. I'm doing most of my turning where the track's not helping me, and I'm straightening out where the track is like, hey, I got traction available for you. So one of the things that I really like to do is do a track walk. And if, Google now has, for some tracks, they've got some video, so you can sort of make up your own track walk. One of the things I like to do on a track walk is look backwards at the corner I just walked through. I think of a corner as a puzzle that can be worked backwards from back to front. You think about, where do I want to end up, and then how do I get there? So there's some value in looking through a corner backwards and thinking through the corner backwards. So at the exit, I was beyond the exit there, and now the cars are a little bit closer to the exit. It was flat, fairly flat. Now you can see a little bit of banking there. And, there's some nice banking in this part of the corner. So I come through, some nice banking here in mid corner. And it starts to go away as I get back towards the entrance of the corner. You can see, looking back to the Bosch sign, it's pretty flat. So looking in the other direction, I can see not only is it nicely banked, but there's a hill The hill catches me. So those hills in general at the exit of corners tend to, hang on to the car and give you better traction. Turn 6 at Laguna Seca, if you look at a two-dimensional map, it has no rights being as fast as it is. The only reason it's so fast is that hill catches you at the exit, keeps you from flying off the track. So here's another resource that you can look at. Most tracks don't have track maps of this level of detail. But here we can, if we zoom into turn 5, we can see we're gaining 18 feet from entrance to exit. So that at 18 feet helps grab the car as I come through the corner. And I can also look at the banking through turn 5. It starts off pretty close to flat, mid-corner, nice banking towards the exit there, very nice banking. Eventually that goes away. But so this tells me I've got way more traction at the exit of the corner than in the beginning of the corner. So I may want to think about that as I figure out my strategy for that corner and plot the line. So here are a couple of lines through the corner. One of these is from the driver we're looking at. The other is a reference. Anybody want to hazard a guess to which color lap is our student's lap?
I'll vote student is yellow.
Yes, yellow or orange. It's orange on my screen, but who knows what it got turned into. So you can see the orange line, there's a lot more turning before the apex than after the apex. It's a bigger radius after the apex. So that's the nature of a late apex line. It's not just where you touch the curb. It's about the geometry of the different parts of the corner. So the blue line is a little bit more balanced before and after the apex in terms of the radius. So let's zoom in a little bit here, and we can see the blue line is a little bit after the red curbing, and the orange line is farther down track, later after the orange curbing. Both of these are fairly high horsepower cars. With a very low horsepower car, you may even think about moving that apex a little earlier. Early apex lines allow you to come into a corner too fast. And in this case, you've got the hill and the banking that help sort that out. So something to think about. This is going to be the line's going to be dependent on the characteristics of the car. So zooming back out a little bit, you can see with the blue line, because it's a more balanced radius before and after the apex, we're getting a lot of turning done after the apex, right? But we've got the banking and the hill to work on that. So one of the things to think about with banking, it's not the same as aero, but it has one thing that's a little bit in common. The faster you go, the more the car gets pressed into the road, right? And so you need to understand and have a little faith in the hill and the banking that will work for you. And if you're used to a certain amount of force, your butt dyno may not work for you. If you're like, well, I'm pressed this hard into the side of the seat, that's how hard I can drive the car. You need to actually tune into what's going on at the contact patches. You need to have that kind of awareness of what's going on with all 4 contact patches so you can understand how close to the limit are you in the car. So that's a key factor to consider when the traction is different in different corners. You can't just say, well, this is how much side loading I feel when I'm going fast. Go ahead.
Conversely, as you're going over the crest of a hill, it will be the reverse effect. So like the Phil Hill up in Willow or something that way, right? Clearly you lose grip as you go over the hill after your apex.
Yes, very much. Yeah, when the road falls away or the camber falls away, you'll have that issue. Okay, so the other thing you have in turn 5 is if you're going to go fast, through this corner and rely on the hill to catch you, you have to be comfortable with the fact that first part of the corner, where it's relatively flat, the car is not going to stick very well. And that's going to feel uncomfortable until you get used to it, that the car is just like, I'm not going to make this work. So you have to get comfortable with the fact that you don't have that much camber, you don't have the slope working for you, but it's going to kick in. And this is especially true with lower horsepower cars. You can't count so much on accelerating up the hill. Whatever speed you can carry into the corner, that helps you all the way to turn 6. So it's an important thing to get used to, and it typically requires kind of nibbling at it a little bit more each time.
And Mark, on that, I'm not sure, maybe you can address that later, but because of that it's not turning as much back, you end up having to actually turn slightly inside of where you want. So you're almost aiming to miss inside of the apex, knowing that your car won't have the grip and it will be pushing slightly wide to put it where you eventually want to be.
Yes. Yeah, you have to really think about that slip angle. And if you find yourself wide at the apex, it may be that you just need to aim for that scary red curb, knowing that the car is going to be pushed wide of it. And that's one of the things it's good about skid pad work or driving on low traction surfaces. You get used to the idea of you're aiming at a place that's not good, knowing that the car is going to slip wide of that. Turn 5 here is one of the first places I really started to understand that back in the day. We'll talk about the goals for this driver. So turn 7, we want to be right on top of that curbing. I have a feeling this driver is not real comfortable with curbing from looking at the video. This is a great place to get used to that going over the curbing. And it's important to keep the eyes forward for the braking zone to the corkscrew. And really, this is one of those places where you are and where you want to be, you really need to connect those and connect those visually. So with turn 9, what I would do is start with touching the paint at the apex. Almost every track has a white stripe of paint on each edge. And for me, when I'm driving within 100% within the bounds of the paved surface, the paint, there's my edge. And then, then I start using curbing as I get going faster and more comfortable, and then maybe beyond, depending on what kind of session it is. But that's the first thing, is getting used to using the asphalt all the way out to the paint. So I would focus on the driver touching the paint every single time. And it's a relatively small target, and they don't need to worry about the curbing, but get to that paint. And then, if they have difficulty with precision aiming, they may end up on the curbing a little bit. That's fine, whatever. And once they have that consistency, then we can come back and talk about how much curbing do we want to use. And the more you get the car loaded up on the outside tires, the less, the car bounces around the inside tires on that curbing, because they're just not loaded so much. That is, turn 5. So turn 5, I'd like to see earlier and slower turn in. I don't necessarily mean the car is going slower, but the hands are moving more slowly. So earlier, slower turn in. We're not trying to square off the corner. We're bending the car into the corner. And apex a little closer to that red curbing. And as Ralph mentioned, think about aiming inside of where the real apex is going to be, because you're counting on some slip on that first part of the corner. And then really learn to rely on the hill and the banking, that it's going to feel too fast, and then the car just gets planted. And that's a great feeling when that happens.